Anyways, it's Anthony with Lighthouse Construction, and today we're back at the new home build on Little Detroit Lake, where we're taking you beyond the blueprint. All right, let's talk about some of the interior finishing work. So if you look right here, you can see we have these awesome beam and column details. And let's take a look at how those actually are getting assembled. So this is a pre-finished oak, and they're using something called a miter lock here, so that all of these pieces have been kind of designed to fit. That way it'll help as, you know, with humidity, wood can contract and can expand. That miter lock is really gonna help keep everything nice and tight together on site versus just doing a 45 and placing those pieces together. So let me show you what that looks like in application. What we've done here is wherever we have a column and beam detail, we've actually built that out with OSB to create the structure, and then we're wrapping this to create the final look versus doing like an 18-inch solid beam. It's incredibly impractical. So we have these around the fireplace here. So now if you look here, you can see this is actually what that miter lock installed looks like. It creates a really nice process versus doing a reveal or something like that. This kind of creates the most true aesthetic to an actual beam. We're actually going to carry across a beam above the doors or below the windows and on the ceiling as well. So there's actually a lot of work that is taking place in here before we can even do some of the cabinetry install on this wall. So we're actually waiting to do some of our final measures on the cabinetry. You can see we do have all of our under cabinet lighting, or actually shelf lighting in this case, mapped out and planned for. But that way we can make sure that everything is very precise in its install method. And something you'll notice too, we actually have a hardwood floor if you look here, but we've protected that. We've done a layer of builder board, which is this cardboard material right here. But then we've also done like a thin plywood sheet good type material. That way when we're working on our scaffolding, there's no risk of us damaging the floor, but we still have the nice finished process of our beam and columns being placed on top of that floor for the nicest look. So sometimes you kind of have to work in an order of operation that's not necessarily ideal from a finishing perspective to create the nicest and most refined finish. As they're working on some of the finishing millwork details, we're also working through some of the roughing on the mechanicals. So you can see all of our gas lines here have been brought to a central location in the utility room. We have an air exchanger here. This is our downdraft furnace. So these are all of the runs that are actually coming up into this main trunk line here. And this is actually our forced air furnace and air conditioner. That condenser is gonna sit outside. And then as we move over here, we transition into our electrical panels. We actually have two panels just because some of the amounts of circuitry would not actually fit within one panel. So I believe there's 400 amps that are actually brought into this home to account for the amount of power that's being used. And then as we transition over to this wall here, we're gonna start to see some of that floor heating system. So this is our boiler for the floor heat system. You can see that all works its way down into those red pipes that go underneath the concrete. Again, with insulation, we had talked about in an earlier video kind of how that works. And then as we transition to this direction, you can see all of our low voltage wiring has kind of been ran on this side of the room. This is everything from data lines, speaker lines that can be used for kind of a whole home Sonos audio system as well. So the utility room really starts to take shape during the finish process as well, because they're running back, all of those lines and terminating some of the connections as well. So I'm standing outside here and we're going to talk about a couple of things, but first let's talk about this condenser here. This is actually what allows the home to have a cooling system, and this is quite a large condenser here because we really wanted to make sure that the cooling system was sized appropriately for the home, and there's never a risk, even if it's 105 degrees, of not being able to cool the home. So definitely a large Rudd multi-stage condenser there. And if we look here, you're going to see the outside of the dog door. So the intention here is that the dogs will be able to pass from a fenced-in area that's outside of this garage into the garage space. So right now we have that plastic cover inside the garage so nobody can get in there. It's kind of a security measure, but there's ultimately going to be a fence that comes in this space that kind of acts as a dog run so that they can kind of be a part of the family but still have a nice confined area. On the exterior here, you can see our siding's been installed, and I think we talked a little bit in our last video about some of the stone that's on site, but you can see now they've started the prep. So they actually put down a wire application against the siding in Tyvek, and then they put almost a coat of mud on top of that. So if you look right here, you can actually see kind of what that mesh wire looks like. That kind of helps to create a nice reinforced surface for that stone to be placed directly on. And if you kind of look towards the front facade of the home here, you can see there's actually going to be stone essentially everywhere you see that gray, as well as the entire tower feature on the front is also going to have stone that continues up to the roof line there. Let's talk about some of the exterior concrete on the front of this home here. So this is actually going to be a covered porch, which it is right now, but it's also gonna have a phantom screen system. So this is actually prepped for concrete because this is gonna receive tile. So this is going to be a nice smooth transition, very finished space from the inside to the outside of the home here. We've actually utilized an ICF form to help continue some of our frost protection. That way this is never subject to any frost heave or any of that. Very nice and structurally sound, as well as that tile is going to create a nice finished floor system in this space. Thanks so much for joining us on today's episode back at the new home build on Little Detroit Lake, where we took you beyond the blueprint.